My name is Stanislaw Robert Luberda, and this is lesson 6 of 10 of my introductory Premiere Pro training course. In this lesson, we're going to be talking all about transitions and some of the trim tools that we use in our panel here. So if you're looking to learn about transitions and what ripple deletes mean and ripple edits mean and slip and slide edits, this video is for you. What exactly is a transition? A transition is basically a point that connects one piece of video to another. In the case right here, I have a push transition that's been applied here. And if I zoom this back out and I just scroll back and forth, you can see what's happening there. It is pushing that video over to the left or the right. So how exactly can I use transitions? If I go to the beginning of my timeline here and I right click, you'll notice that I have a apply default transition. And I can do the same to my audio as well. If I right click at the beginning here, I can apply a default transition. And the default transitions for video and audio is basically a cross dissolve. And what a cross dissolve does is, because there's nothing before here, it's dissolving from darkness or blackness here into 100% opacity. So if I play this back, you can see that that's fading in. Additionally, our music is also fading in. So if I use my left and right arrow keys, you can see how that is getting louder and my screen is becoming more opaque. Where exactly can you use transitions? Well, you can use them pretty much anywhere that you have two clips meet. And what it'll do is place a transition between those two clips. So in my case right here, I've got these two scenes fading from one to another. If, however, I have a piece of media that doesn't have any handles, so for example, I've just dragged this out until it's reached the limit, and I'm going to drag this out and make sure it hits its limit, and try placing a transition, it'll tell me that there isn't enough media. So if you remember in our other lesson when we were talking about handles, there's not enough media to actively transition from one to another. So that's another reason why we have to have handles in our clips. So now if I right click, I have handles on here. I can see here's my out point of this clip, and here's some extra media that I'll be fading with, and the same with this clip. I'm actually going to shorten this one here just a tiny bit. Pull that one over here. So now it has extra media in the front, and I can right click and apply a default transition. You can find all your transitions under your effects panel. So in your project panel here, we have our effects. Under effects, I have a panel here just for video transitions. We're going to get into the video effects at a later time. Right now, I'm concerned with this video transitions, and we have a few different options here. I might have one or two more than you have on your screen, and that's okay. I just have some third-party plugins installed here. And if I open up my dissolve, you'll notice that I have a specific one that's highlighted here. And this is our cross dissolve. So every time I place a transition on my timeline here, right click, apply default transition, that is actually a cross dissolve. If I highlight over that, you can see that the duration is 1 second, and it is a cross dissolve. This icon here means that this is our default transition. If I want to change my default transition to, say, dip to black, I can right click this and set this as my default transition. What this will do now is if I right click, I can apply my default transition, and now this is a dip to black. And here's what that will look like. And let's go ahead and I'm just going to apply these to a bunch of them. If I want to delete a transition, I can just select it and hit delete. And I'll just go ahead and apply a few more. And we can see what that looks like. And you can see that it is dipping to black and then coming back up. The dip to black can be a little dramatic, so the cross dissolve is typically used instead. By default, this is usually what you're going to see as far as transitions is the cross dissolve. And what the cross dissolve is realistically doing is it is fading one clip off while the next clip is fading on. So let's take a look at some of the other transitions that we have here. There are a few transitions that I don't typically recommend for any professional uses whatsoever, and I don't really understand why they're still in use. I haven't been able to find a use for them, and they look very cheesy. Two of those are going to be right under this 3D motion. If I apply this 3D motion cube spin, here's what that's going to look like. And our flip over looks like this. Another one that I don't really understand why we still have that is the page peel. And you'll notice every time I'm applying one of these transitions here, I'm getting this red line. What this red line means is that Premiere needs to render before it can play back at full speeds. And this is going to create video previews in our project file that we specified before. And to start our render, we're going to hit enter or return. Depending on the effect or the transition that you're using, sometimes it'll take a little bit more time than other times. Anything that's very graphic intensive will definitely take a little bit more time. Here is what the page peel looks like. Yeah, it's big white silvery page peel here that I've never been able to find a use for. There are a bunch of transitions that I don't really recommend. The ones that I typically use though are the cross dissolve, dip to white or dip to black. I will use a lot of pushes and slides. Those are probably the ones that I stick with most often than not. Some transitions give us different options. For example, if I place this push onto here, and you can see this is what it looks like. It's going to push from one screen over to the other, and I double click on the actual transition, I'll get a duration. So I can change this to say 2.00 for 2 seconds, and now that transition is going to last 2 seconds. I'm going to go ahead and render that out really quick. And now that is a 2-second transition that's happening there. I can also hover over my transition here, and you'll notice that I can drag this out. So just like our trim tool, if we wanted to trim something back, we can also extend or contract our actual transition here. If I come up to my effect controls, which is in my source monitor here, I'll highlight over my push and hit my effect controls, and it gives me a panel of what I can change in this transition. For example, right now this push is happening from a left to a right, or I can use these buttons to change that. So now this will go north to south. I also have a playhead up here to play back that transition here. So it's giving me a very, very tiny preview of how it's going to play back. If this isn't showing your actual sources, make sure this button is checked here. This is show actual sources. If I have that unchecked off, which you might, it'll look like this instead. So again, I'm just previewing how that's going to look like. And depending on which transition you use, you're going to have different options. For example here, we have this center split. If I use this center split here, I don't really have any options here. It's just splitting from the center, and that's all that it can do. I can't really change anything else here. One that I do have that I can kind of work with is the iris round. The iris will let me specify where I'm starting this transition. So you'll notice that I'm grabbing this tiny little puck and I'm moving it to the corner here. And it is going to iris out from that area there. I meet a lot of new editors that will have cross dissolves on every single transition point. While that's not necessarily wrong, visually it makes things a little too soft. When using transitions, think of it as a spice. If you use a lot of spice, it is just going to overpower whatever dish you may be cooking. Instead, less tends to be more. And by that, I have no transitions here, and it is jump cutting from one section to another. Now let's have a quick conversation about our trim tool. So I'm just going to undo all of this here. I have this project right now that's a little too long. Right now my total duration is 1 minute and 10 seconds and 23 frames, and I can see that right over here. And I want to trim this down to about 30 seconds. So I have a couple ways I can trim this down. I could, go ahead one piece at a time, something like this, and kind of constantly move things over, or I can use something called a ripple edit and ripple deletes. If I come over to my trim tools here, we've been using our selection tool, and that's been letting me trim items down to specific lengths. As I'm trimming things down, you'll notice I get a little tooltip that tells me exactly how much time I'm cutting off and the new duration of the clip. So right now, if I let go, the clip will be exactly 4 seconds and 12 frames shorter for a new total duration of 11 seconds and 22 frames. I'm going to undo that. There's times though that I just want to keep trimming without having to move everything back and kind of fill in my gaps. To do that, I'm going to use my ripple edit tool. And what my ripple edit tool does is it will automatically trim back everything else. If I pull back using my ripple edit tool to about right here, you'll notice that all the rest of the clips shove on over there. So this is a really quick and easy way that I can say, okay, maybe let's get rid of this clip or make it a little bit shorter and shorten this one and shorten these. As I'm playing these clips back, I can decide what I want to cut off. So maybe, I want to get this guy here, but maybe not so much from this part forward. I leave my playhead here, I trim this back, and there we go. There's other times too that I want to alter my clip here. So I have this clip right here of me sticking my iPhone in the water here and catching some video of some fish. And instead of using this section to this section, I kind of want to slide this in and out point to over here. And that's actually going to update my video here. I have that same tool right over here. This is our slip tool. And our slip tool will do exactly what I just did right here. So I grab this little tiny handle here, and I'm just moving it over here. So we have all this footage to choose from, and I wanted this to be exactly 5 seconds and 20 frames so I don't leave any gaps or holes. And I'm just selecting a new in and out point for my clips there. And if I drag this back and forth, that's doing that same thing. So I'm just dragging it to the right, and you can see how that's moving this in and out point. If I want to just remove this clip and shove everything else over, I have two options. I can just delete this clip, and now I have this gap here. Or I can select this clip, hold on to Shift, and use the delete key next to our end key on our keyboard. And that will actually ripple delete it. I can also right-click this and go up to ripple delete. If I have gaps in my timeline like this that I want to remove, I can actually right-click in the empty space and ripple delete it. And that will actually remove it that way. If I have clips that don't necessarily match my frame, so for example here, I've got this clip that doesn't fill my whole frame, and I don't care too much about the quality, I can actually right-click this clip and hit scale to frame size. And that will actually blow it up a little bit. In the next lesson, we're going to be taking a deeper look at what just happened in here, and we're going to start looking at effect controls. So that's going to be all about our coloring and applying different effects in Premiere Pro. Again, my name is Stanislaw Luberda with AV Ultra, and this has been my Introductory to Premiere Pro class, Lesson 6, all about transitions and trim tools. Hopefully you found this useful.